Hello and welcome back. What I want to do during this session is talk about the full cycle of enterprise development. And what I mean by that is I want to start from where we start, and I want to go all the way through the process of enterprise development to talk down to the level of scaling the business based on the different steps that are in between. Now, obviously, if you were in class, you had an opportunity to listen to this at the time. So this is nothing other than just simply a summary of what those particular steps are. Let's go ahead and start with the very first one, which is conceptualization. What I mean by conceptualization is the actual creation of the entrepreneurial concept. In other words, what is it that we're attempting to do in broad terms? The example that I used in class dealt with the Tuscan Gardens opportunity, which is currently the business that I am currently running as the CEO of Tuscan Gardens, which is an assisted living and a memory care senior living company. The concept began, as I mentioned to you, based upon the fact that I literally couldn't find a place that I would be willing to put my mother, just based on the standards that were there out in the community. So I would go out into the community, I would look to see what was there. I say, not interested in doing that. So I would keep mom in 24/7 care at the house, and this was after she had gotten sick and years after my dad had passed away. So that process began several times over a couple-year period of time until finally, back in 2010, it began to occur to me that if I couldn't find some place that I'd be prepared to put my mother, the question is, well, why not? What would it have to look like? And when I asked the seminal question, excuse me, what would it have to look like? That was the beginning of the conceptualization of Tuscan Gardens. And by conceptualization, what I mean is, it was a concept. Well, what would that look like? Well, it would have to be an airy place. It would have to be a place that had natural aromatics, the rosemary plant, the basil plant. I would want to make sure that they could smell the Italian spaghetti sauce actually being created. And of course, if that's the case, then you would want to have an exposed Tuscan kitchen, and so forth and so on. So the concept of upscale senior living life, if you will, the art of living with purpose, passion, and joy, was really the concept that germinated into what is now obviously a brick and mortar Tuscan Gardens operation. From conceptualization, I just brought you into the second step, which is creating the schematics. And what I mean by the schematics is that a concept is one thing, but I now have to be able to really identify what its characteristics are. The characteristics, better known as the traits, if you will, what does it look like? Well, it's going to have so many units, for example. It would have to have high ceilings and natural light. We'd want to make sure that the herbs are actually being grown on property and things of that nature. That represents the schematics. A schematic is not a full-blown business plan. We'll talk about that in a second. But it does have enough meat that I can actually transition into the next step. So it goes from concept to the next step, and it's understanding for 4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages, what the broad contour is with respect to this particular business enterprise. Schematics number 2. From the schematics, I now have an opportunity to go to market. What do I mean by go to market? I'm in my head at that point. I've got a concept. I've got the schematics. I see what it looks like. But I don't really know what it looks like in relationship to what's in the market right now. My concept was upscale senior living. Well, I don't know what else other people are doing in the upscale senior living business. And so I go to market to do that. I go to market, I'm talking about all the sources available to all of us. Nowadays, it's easier than ever to go to market because, of course, you got Google. So you have Google and search opportunities, and Google presents other opportunities inside it for other research databases. There are archival databases available. All of this is nothing other than just simply textbook research. You've got industry data, and again, right on the other side of your computer. Outside your computer and outside the online resources available to you, what you also have is the opportunity to go to conferences and conventions, subscribe to e-letters, many of which nowadays, of course, are just plain free. Reviewing white papers that have been published, white papers that are provided through the associations. What are the associations in the particular industry that you are interested in getting involved in? What kind of resources do they have available for you? And so forth and so on. The point of going to market is to make sure that with the schematics that I've got of the particular concept that I have conceived of, I now need to understand its place in the industry and its place in the market so that I then have an opportunity to put together a cogent business plan. And that's next, the cogent business plan. I don't really call it a business plan, by the way. I had with my prior company, which was an enterprise development and management company, we would always have, for every particular new product that we would bring to market, we created what was known as a charter. A charter is different than a business plan. You know, typically in business school, they teach you about this business plan, which is 10 pages or 12 pages or something of that nature. You know, my enterprise charter for the Tuscan Gardens opportunity was some 50 pages, 55 pages long. It was everything that I could possibly imagine. It consisted of all of the usual suspects. It consisted of pro formas, for example. It consisted of market evaluation, the competitive analysis of the competitors, the market positioning with respect to how I was positioning this product in relationship to those players which are out there, so forth and so on. But more than that, it also identified in the enterprise charter the look and feel of it. As a matter of fact, in my case, for the enterprise charter, I actually used that when we retained the original architect, engineer, and contractor to actually say, okay, guys, read this. This is what it's going to look like. And from that, they were able to get not only the specifics of the specs, if you will, the schematics, but on top of that, they were able to actually feel the heartbeat, the heart and the soul of the type of community that I was creating. So that's called, to me, an enterprise charter. You can call it whatever you like, but the bottom line is you have to now document your design document that identifies what this particular business is. And when documenting it, I mean on paper, memorialized, so that somebody can see it, they can understand it, they know exactly what you're trying to accomplish with this particular business. After you have gotten that design document, it's now time for you to be able to validate it. I call that, you could call it any number of things. You could call it construct validation. You could actually call it feasibility study. But here's the point. When I now know what it is that I want to do in detail, and I've got pro formas, which means I have what? I have assumptions which are supporting the pro forma. Well, now I need to really bang on this thing. Are those assumptions valid assumptions? Can I really sell based on what I thought? Can I really price it in the way that I think? Is the market as deep or as narrow, as the case may be, that I really think it is based upon the pro formas and the forecasts that I am projecting inside my design document? So that's a construct validation process. And it's from that standpoint that I have the opportunity to then move to the next stage. If it's a no, then I'm going to have to rework my assumptions. If on the other side the answer is yes, I firmly believe that, I now go to the next stage, which is the production stage. What is the production stage? It is actually providing something which can represent a proof of concept. You can't go from nothing other than a validation process into full-blown production. You have to go into a proof of concept stage. So it is production, but it's production at the minimal level. In other words, what is it that I can do to create at the minimal value, the minimal production, so that I know that this is a viable product? The concept of a minimum viable product, an MVP, is critical at this production stage because at the end of the day, I'm not real clear on that proof of concept until I actually do it in reality. Part of the problem with so many businesses that go directly into production, they forget about the fact that you have to have a proof of concept at some point, and you don't want to be spending all of your available resources to be able to get to that proof of concept. And so you use an MVP approach, and which, by the way, is the subject of a different lecture that I'll be giving. But in the MVP approach, what we're talking about is allowing ourselves the opportunity to produce at a minimal level so that we understand that the thing which represents the substance of the value that I am offering with respect to this particular business is actually going to be of value to a consumer. Now, why do you want it to be an MVP? For two reasons. First of all, because you don't want to be spending your entire resource or investment for it. But number two, because you want validated learning. You want the ability to be able to get back feedback because it's through that feedback that you then begin to burnish the product, which brings you to the next stage. Once I've got an MVP, best way that I can describe it is you then start iterating like crazy. What does an iteration mean? What an iteration means is that I now take this thing, I do my thing, I get back feedback, I modify it, and I do it again. And then I get back feedback, I modify based on that feedback, and I do it again. It's more than a proof of concept. Proof of concept is viability. Now the issue is, what is the thing that is going to ultimately represent the rollout for me? A startup business, an entrepreneurial pursuit, is fundamentally an effectuation process. I start here, but I could end up here or here or here or here. I don't know which one I'm going to end up with. So I have to be iterating the product as against market segments to be able to identify what is the optimal configuration between what I'm doing for a particular market based upon the particular product or service that I'm delivering. That iteration process ultimately leads you into a particular next stage, which is the product market mix. And when I've now identified that product market mix and connected those two, it's at that point with that matrix that I then have the opportunity to then go forward. When I go forward, I now go forward on a steady beat, knowing full well that I have already iterated to what is the optimal configuration of the product against the market that I'm actually targeting. So then I begin to grow. How do I grow? I grow by creating levers of growth that allow me an opportunity, because now I'm getting real feedback. I now see margins. I now see the type of market that's actually responding to me. I see what I'm leaving on the table for markets that I have not yet addressed, and so forth. So as I begin, the way that I describe it is I crank the levers. And by cranking the levers of growth, I now allow myself to generate additional revenue in a steady way, and also allow myself to generate additional profit. And I also allow myself to transition to the next stage, which is what? Capturing adjacent territory. What I mean by capturing adjacent territory is that I then begin growing. I could be growing horizontally. I could be growing vertically. I could be growing based upon my influence with respect to the particular customer that I am servicing. So continue to provide additional services to that customer. But the bottom line is, once I'm in control of the levers and therefore have the opportunity to crank the lever in the appropriate way, I then now use that as an opportunity to continue to capture additional space. And as I capture that additional area on that football field that I am playing in, I now allow myself to actually begin growing, and growing substantially the company. Final challenge, going from there to integrating into your DNA, for want of a better term, the DNA of your business, opportunities for scalability. The opportunities for scalability can come from any number of dimensions, but there are processes, again, which I'll be describing in subsequent lectures, which will allow you the opportunity for exponential growth, or said differently, it allows you an opportunity to truly see where your primary growth lies, and in some cases, that growth track could actually be disruptive to the way current industry or business is operating. But those things occur only after everything that I've just discussed with you occurs. So what are we talking about? We're talking about creating the concept of a business, developing the schematics for the business, going to market with that business, allowing myself the production of a design document to memorialize that business, creating the feasibility that validates the construct that I'm using, going into an MVP for the production of that product or that service. You continue to iterate that until I now have the right product for the right market. You now start producing that and growing that business by developing the levers of growth and by expanding into adjacent territory. From there, you now see, by developing the DNA in your business, how you can then scale it either exponentially or disruptively into a solid business enterprise. I know what it looks like because I've done it any number of times. That's it for today. I probably went a little bit longer than I should. We'll have other particular lectures in particular segments of this. This is just simply the broad overview of the full enterprise cycle. Glad you could join me. Look forward to seeing you again. Talk soon.